Hello, welcome to episode 3 of Yokogawa Unwrapped. Last time we looked at how digital control of work comes to life in real workplaces. In this episode, we focus on the user, what good user experience means in safety critical environments, how design choices shape culture, and how Yokogawa's OpreX Control of Work makes complex work simpler, clearer, and safer. So, for this, who better than our guest today to help us understand? I am joined by Dan Craggs, Senior Developer at Yokogawa Wrap. Hi, Dan. Welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Atreya. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. How has your day been so far?
It's been very good. Thank you.
Yeah, that's nice. And it's nice to see you happy and smiling. Dan, first question. What is UX and how do you go about creating a positive user experience?
So user experience is essentially the sum of a user's experiences and interactions with the product.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often it's conflated with just the user interface. That
Right.
is the actual kind of front end that a user sees. And of course, the user interface is a big part of the user experience. But like I said, it really is the sum of everything of how a user feels about a product, their satisfactions, the frustrations they have with it,
Yeah.
and also the effect that it has on the way they work. I actually heard it described at some point as it goes as far as to include the thoughts that a person is having as they drift off to sleep at night about a product. And
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a little far for our product, but it's kind of that whole experience, as the name might suggest. So essentially what you have to do is kind of utilize some core knowledge and some core principles that you have that work for a wide range of people in terms of how you go about designing the product, how about you engage the users to be open to their feedback and listen to them and how they are experiencing it,
Yeah.
and always be keen to evolve your approach to things based upon that feedback as well, because we can design something, we can create something that does adhere to the core principles that we have and utilize all of that knowledge that we've built up over time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if we don't listen to user feedback, then it's only half the picture. So it's kind of merging those two worlds together to come up with a product that is suitable for the actual end user.
So, in your view, then, how can UX design foster a stronger safety culture on site?
So I think it's important to remember that Wrap 4 is at its core a safety product.
Yes.
And as you previously mentioned, there are, of course, consequences to such products if they're not quite what the user expects them to be. I'm not going to go into the sort of negative potential consequences. I think the industry is well aware of that. But in terms of the positive side of it, what you want to have is a user experience that I like to think of it as reducing the friction to actually engaging with a product and using a product. If you can make a user feel that a product is beneficial to them, if you can make them feel like it saves them time, it stops them making mistakes, it improves the visibility and the knowledge that they have of what's going on around them.
Right.
If you make it generally beneficial, then they have enthusiasm to use the product. And once you have that enthusiasm, you can then engage the user in using that product rigorously. If you say to them, look, we have all of this functionality available, in a digital system. Of course, digital systems have massive benefits over the old sort of paper-based systems and things.
Yeah.
If you can engage them and let them see all of this functionality and make that functionality useful and make it accessible, then what you can have is that is all of the ability of the system to kind of make things more robust in terms of the actions that they perform on site, readily engaged with by those users.
Right. And it's almost like bridging the gap essentially. between the problem and the user, and
Exactly.
UX is solving that in the middle.
Exactly. So, I mean, especially for some of the paper-based systems, paper-based systems came about from evolution anyway.
Yeah.
They made mistakes with them. They decided they needed different filing practices with them, and a user already. I mean, maybe you don't think about someone that's filling in paper forms as a user, but essentially that's what it is. It's a user's experience with that system that they currently have, and so when it comes to moving to a digital system. Yes, we also have the kind of experience that we develop for users who aren't familiar with it anyway. But there's also, like you say, kind of not only bridging a gap with the sort of problems that they face on site, but bridging that gap where some members of a site might be used to a totally different system.
Yeah.
If the younger members of site, for example, who haven't been around on site for very long, may just be used to a digital system. The others may have some kind of vestigial memories and sort of motivations that came from the paper-based system. So it all factors in, and that like we said before, it's all subjective. And this wide range of knowledge and this wide range of experience that come from each different user. You have to try and adhere to those core principles that does bridge that gap, like you say, from the problem to the actual solution that you develop.
So from paper, it went on to digital, as in your computers and your laptops, and now it's also come to your, handheld devices like your tablets and your mobile devices. So what were some of the design priorities for users in that field?
So the mobile devices are almost it is a separate research topic even for those that do develop, user experience design. Because it brings with it a whole bunch of challenges, as you can imagine. One, it's a lot smaller.
Yes.
If you go from, the screens that we quite often have in our offices now, they're huge screens. They're bordering on TVs at some point. To go from that to something that has to fit in your hand, you then suffer from what we call reduced screen real estate. It's a lot smaller of a screen, and it's, as a result, less resolution. Some of them are probably pretty high resolutions when you think about very modern phones.
Yeah.
But in terms of what the human eye can see, you can't really go particularly small, especially when, it's, again, it can be a wide range of users on site. It could be those with visual impairments, right? You certainly don't want to make things too small. But also you don't want to clutter a user, because even if you could fit everything on a mobile device, a lot of the time it is not appropriate to do so. You have the smaller screen, which means you need to reduce the number of things on it for visibility, but you also don't want that kind of cognitive clutter, shall we call it?
Right.
Where it overloads someone, where they're like, okay, great, so I've got an app where it apparently does all of these things, but where on earth do I find that?
Yeah.
The number of times you go into an app and you happen to click on a menu and you go, oh, that thing is in there. Why did they hide that in there?
And that happens a lot.
It does happen a lot. And so this is, it's, like I said, it's a completely different ball game to develop for a mobile app. And so what we actually want to have with our mobile device, our mobile app, it is a reduced subset of the functionality, because that removes the clutter. But we also want it to have the same kind of procedural feel to it as the desktop app. And we also do want, of course, the ability to have it feel consistent, especially when you're doing something like offline.
Right.
Because we allow some users to go out into the field and do stuff without a network connection. And so for that side of it, you do sort of want consistency in terms of it, that it feels like they're actually carrying out the actions that they would carry if they were online. But, you want to keep that within constraints. So it's a balancing act. A lot of this stuff is balancing acts in a way, isn't it? You don't want to overload someone that has a mobile app, but you also want to kind of give them that consistency and give them the functionality that is useful to them on a mobile device.
Right. And so can you share how RAP4's interface adapts for different user roles without becoming complex? Somewhat similar to what we were just talking about, but in terms of complex user roles.
Yeah, so I think the wrap product is massively configurable. I think is
Yeah.
probably an understatement there. Massively configurable to a client's needs, and can be configured then for different user abilities. And so what we end up doing is a combination of hiding or disabling functionality depending on the context there. Obviously, if a functionality is turned off or it's configured in a certain way across a site, then it just doesn't appear. But we have permissions and permission groups in the system which determine what a user can or cannot do, and we can tie those into certificates as well. So a user requires a certain certification to actually be able to carry out a certain action. And it's always good then to give some helpful feedback. So if a user tries to do an action that they can't, then we say to them, hey, you tried to do this, but you're unable to because you don't have this permission or you don't have this certification. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to bombard users. We don't want to, if there's a user that can do everything in the system, we don't want a screen full of buttons. That's going to be the worst approach for it. And also, when it comes to actually receiving notifications and emails, I know a lot of clients do rely on those as ways of kind of letting their users know that something is needed or that something has happened. And also for that, you don't want to bombard someone with notifications or emails that are irrelevant to them. So you tailor those to, maybe only certain people that have a certain permission group, or even directly to specific users, for example. We have many ways of kind of filtering down and narrowing down what users can do and how they are roped into various actions within the system.
And so do you think that a poorly designed interface could undermine safety practices? And just from your perspective, how do you prevent that?
So as we talked about before, if on the plus side, if a user feels like a system is very frictionless and it gives them the functionality that they want and it saves them time and all of these kind of good things, that increases engagement with the system. But the opposite is if you start making it frustrating to use, or if it's difficult to use or it's confusing to use, then that increases what I like to think of as the friction there. There's friction to them using the system, and then maybe they don't use it as rigorously as they should, or maybe they just they do everything they can to not interact with the system. So of course that's the worst case scenario, because you always want to kind of entice those users in. And so in terms of how you go about creating that positive environment within the system and creating that positive user experience, kind of circling back to the general topic of this, it's useful, for example, for users to be told, okay, well, what actions need to be performed on a certain thing right now? What checks do you need to carry out right now? What readings need to be taken right now? So they can easily come into the system and at a glance be told, okay, here's the state of a thing, and here's what has to happen next with it. And so RAP often has steps. If you go into a permit, for example, you'll see at the top there's kind of the affectionately, I think I refer to them as the blobs. But it's the kind of the status kind of dots at the top of the screen, and that's a very visual indication of what state a certain thing is in and what has to happen after this point. But we also have the traffic light system. The sort of green, amber, red type traffic light system, and even just the statuses of items within the system. We take for granted the fact that a permit is in, approved status, for example. Okay, but how would you know that from looking at a paper-based system? You'd have to go and talk to a bunch of people to figure that out. And so it's making those kind of things very accessible and very visible and having them at a glance. And you can even just do that from the listing screens. With everything in the system that we try to do, we want to make it very accessible and also follow sort of some basic UI principles to enhance everything from readability to the clarity of things, and also the consistency of a user interface across the different screens as well. And of course, you've got other advantages with a digital system. You can do things like validating inputs so that you reduce kind of mistakes. You can obtain signatures to make sure that you're kind of adding some layer of security there and actually recording who is performing certain actions. So, you know, there's so many things you can do within the system. I mean, I could probably list out every functionality that the system actually has, right? In that it is a useful thing for a user to have access to. But there are kind of some very core things, like the things I've just mentioned, that can, you know, overall in the system, give a user a reason to want to engage with it and engage with it well. And once you have that, then, you know, it has a very positive effect then on the safety practices on site.
I get it. And I think just sort of visualizing that, and when a user sees that everything is so systematic, they would sort of want to engage with it more as well.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you know, if you know that you can reliably go into the system and see this certain piece of information that you need, or, you know, immediately go and perform these actions on things that need your approval or that, you know, or your interaction with, and that is quick for you to do, then, you know, it at the end of the day, it makes your job easier and it makes your job quicker.
Saves time,
you know, saves energy, and it makes it safer as well, because you know that everything is recorded.
Right. And there's so many, like you said, there are so many features that you can probably go on about, but amongst all of that, what's one feature in RAP4 that really stands out from you from a UX perspective?
So I'm going to be a bit biased with this one.
Right.
I'm going to say the conversation/messaging functionality within the system, mainly because I worked on that. That was one of the products that I helped develop. One of the features I helped develop.
Yeah.
I think it's already so useful, and it's one of those things that, you know, this is that thing I talked about earlier on of, you know, we can design things, but it's only when it goes out into the real world that you then see the impact that it has, or the effect that it has. That was a feature that we designed and we put in because there was a specific use case for it. But then to get client feedback about how messages and conversations and discussions and things have improved the visibility and the communication around certain things on site is actually really cool, because you know, it's nice to see the stuff that you've designed actually have real world impact, and you know, we have so much potential for that for future. I mean, it's not going to be a WhatsApp or anything anytime soon, certainly, but you know, we can certainly tie it. One day we'll need a bigger team for that one, I think. But it's something that I think actually has worked its way into the processes that people have in how they see the work and how they discuss the work. And like I said, that's very cool.
So in your entire experience, like, you know, how has the UX of RAP4 evolved over the years, and like solely based on user needs?
So I think you kind of have to look at it in the entirety of the RAP software. You know, long before even anything web-based, you know, the RAP software started off as a desktop application.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, way back, and it was kind of, if you imagine the very old Windows versions with the sort of big clunky grey buttons and things like that. It started off like that way back at the start. And so it went from that and then back in, you know, sort of into the age of the web, shall we say.
Right.
And it became web-based. And as we've kind of evolved into RAP4, we learned a huge amount of information from our RapNet system, which was around for a very long time.
Okay.
But we also knew that we wanted to focus more on some core usability principles and also take into account a lot of the client feedback and kind of wish list requests that we'd had over the years. And so, the layout of everything now, I think, is a lot clearer. It's a lot more streamlined.
Yeah.
Again, we mentioned earlier on about saving users time and energy and effort and so on. And we even brought along entire new features as well. Features that enhance the visibility or make things easier for the users, or are of course entire new features. Just that are unrelated to anything we've had in the past, and new modules, and it's. I think what we ended up having is a product now that is a really good springboard to add additional features to, or add new modules to, or implement user feedback. And of course, what we also have is much greater customizability. And the way that we've structured it is with that customizability in mind. You can go into the administration screens, and the amount of customizability that you can do within the system is huge. It's much more than we've ever had before.
Yeah.
It kind of was developed with that in mind.
So right now, are there any new UX enhancements in development that you're looking forward to?
So we do have a few new integrations with other technologies and products in the pipeline. I think the big thing right now, of course, in the world generally is AI.
Yes.
So we're kind of looking at AI integration to help users save time and receive more feedback when it comes to the risk assessment process. And the use of real-time data from various sensors as well is something that we're looking at. We could, potentially incorporate those as part of verification processes for things like isolations, or, permits to be returned with certain sensor values and so on. So, we've got a couple of exciting technologies that are going to potentially be working their way in and will enhance the experience that the user has with the system, and hopefully, like we said, make things a lot easier.
Dan, thank you so much for such incredible insights so far. That's it for part 1 of our episode. If you have enjoyed listening so far, stay tuned for part 2 to know more about the role of UX in digital control of work.